Welcome to Explaining Stocks to 5-year-olds. Today I'm joined by Luba Nikulina. She is the Chief Strategy Officer at IFM Investors. Luba, thank you so much for joining today.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Nikki.
Anytime. I guess to kick it off, I just would like to know what sparked your initial interest in investing.
Yeah, it was a roundabout way. Actually, it was not very early in my career or in my life. I initially was very interested in everything related to words, literature, books. So my first degree is in linguistics. And it's through playing with different languages and texts, I came across finance, businesses, and realized that it's even a cooler thing to have when you can combine words with numbers. And that's similar to human beings. Every business has a story, but this story has to be supported by numbers. And so this combination of words and numbers is what ultimately inspired me to get myself immersed in investing.
I think that's an excellent combination because I feel like finance and investing in itself is like another language. So I think that's beautiful. And then I guess, how did you get started? Like, what was your initial foot in the door? I know you kind of come from various backgrounds. So if we could go through that and how you kind of found your way into investing, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, it was actually the first job that I had. It was at a very entry level in a bank, but it was in a very interesting department that looked to invest in different businesses. So essentially the ultimate investing, and I was there at the very start of my career by pure serendipity. And so what I was doing at the very start is trying to assess the story of every business that we were looking to buy. And it was a long time ago, so it was almost like without any constraints. We would go anywhere where we would see an interesting story, be it energy supply or mining and metals, or the industry that totally fascinated me was everything related to timber. So I was absolutely fascinated with how if you take a forest and maintain it well, then you can make high quality timber out of it. And then this allows you to build beautiful furniture. So I spent quite a bit of time investing in this area. So yeah, this is how I started building my career as an investor. And the rest is history.
I think that's excellent. And timber in general, I feel like you have an entrepreneurship background too. So that kind of on top of being an investor, you know what it's like to be on the other side as well and operate in the business, which I think is such a powerful thing. I guess going back to the younger version of yourself, what traits of the younger version of you do you think make you a successful investor today?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure what made me successful, it's the curiosity about things. It obviously has its downside because I'm not particularly patient, but I do love exploring things, learning about new industries, new businesses, new people, hearing their stories. And then also, if you can also get yourself actively involved in those stories and help make a difference, either for people or for businesses, that's incredibly rewarding. And this is what investment is about.
That's fantastic. I feel like when we're younger, you just remember stories with your parents and listening to stories. So it correlates really, really well. And for people who don't know what correlation means, connects. It basically connects really well. I guess your role is a chief strategy officer, and that's something many of our listeners may have heard before or may not have heard before. Can you walk us through what a chief strategy officer is and does?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't look for a standard definition. I think there is something about strategy when you are a chief strategy officer, but what you do will differ from one business to another. I work for an investment firm called Industry Fund Management, IFM Investors. And we were created almost 30 years ago by Australian pension funds. So we are owned by pensioners, and they will be construction workers, teachers, firefighters, police officers. And our job is to ensure that they have great retirement. So, and this is the Australian business, but now my job as a chief strategy officer is to help this business to develop its story globally, to become a global business with Australian heritage that looks after retirement, not only for pensioners in Australia, but also for clients globally. So essentially, like, I am the chief developer of this story of IFM Investors. This is how I think about my job as chief strategy officer.
I like that definition. And I think it's very true. It varies on the type of business that you're operating in, but it's a very powerful role. And I guess diving into that, what do you think is the most innovative part of your job? Because you could really go in multiple directions with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is a lot of innovation that you can unlock in investment, which is another aspect that I genuinely love about the area where we both work. However, over time, I sort of started as a pure investor. What the numbers? This is what just kicked my interest in investments. But then over time, as I assumed more and more leadership responsibilities, I'm actually finding that working with people is probably the most innovative and also the most rewarding part of the job. So helping people unlock their capabilities and potential as great investors, but also bringing people together in teams, giving them the right story, where to go, how to grow, and ensuring that as a team, we become more powerful in our ability to affect change compared to us separately as individuals. So finding innovative ways to lead and inspire teams, I think, is the most innovative part of my job.
That's fantastic. I feel like anytime you're dealing with people, it's just like you get different viewpoints and diversity. So it just adds to it. So I guess for today, I would really like to go over asset classes, just because that's an area that I don't think I've touched on before. And for those of you listening that don't know what an asset class is, this is a group of investments with similar characteristics. So Luba, you've worked in various areas and you lead investment strategy. So I would be curious on what your current favorite asset class is.
Yes, indeed, Nikhil. I worked for pretty much every asset class out there in the universe. And I think, obviously, the combination of different asset classes is what helps you as an investor. So it's a little bit dangerous to have a favorite when you are an investor. But IFM investors mostly invest in infrastructure. It can be invested through equity or through debt with various risk-return profiles, but it's the investment characteristics, as you said, of the underlying assets, underlying businesses that we invest into is what makes this group distinct. And I think if I were to be limited to just one asset class in my portfolio, it would definitely be infrastructure.
That's helpful. I guess just to break it down for the kids in the audience, how would you describe infrastructure? Like, to break it down further, like just in terms of what they see and what they might be exposed to, because I feel like you could be walking down the road and see infrastructure.
I think it's not only kids, it's probably adults as well, that the best way to explain something relatively new as an asset class and infrastructure is relatively new is by the way of example. And if I were to generalize quickly, I think infrastructure could be described as things that help us move stuff around and also save and live comfortably. And now, if we go into examples, let's take roads, right? So you're at home, you need to go to school. How do you get there? You take a bus, and a bus takes you on the road from your home to school. So that's infrastructure. It allows you to move around. Or for example, water. If you are thirsty or you want to cook your dinner, then you go to the kitchen, open the tap, and water is there. But it somehow needs to get from the sea. So there is a pipe underground that allows this water to move from the sea to our house. This is infrastructure. Or electricity. Like if it's dark in the room, you switch on the light, but it comes from the power plant somewhere many miles away. So it's the grid that we built underground that allows electricity to come to our home. It's just so important for people, all these things that allow us to move around, that people are prepared to pay for these services. And so if you invest $1 of your money in building infrastructure, people will be prepared to pay you back more than you invest because they really need these services. So this is infrastructure for kids and adults.
That was excellent. I feel like it's the stuff that we walk around and we see as a given, but it's really just like we need it to survive in many ways. And like you said, for our safety. I guess you kind of touched on this earlier, but maybe we can elaborate a bit more on why you currently like this asset class preferred to others.
Yeah, well, I'm conscious that the audience may be kids, so like I will probably not be explaining about inflation linkages. I think what is important there in simple terms is this is essential. Water is essential, electricity is essential, roads are essential. And as a result, these investments are resilient. So if everything else doesn't look good, we are in downturn, we are in difficult times, these investments will continue to be resilient. And as a result, they just provide you with additional safety net when you need it. And this is what I find attractive about these investments. It provides you with the return, but it also has an element of safety in it. And in the financial language, we will also call it inflation linkage.
No, I think inflation is super powerful too, because it's a need, not a want. And if you guys follow my comics, you might have seen my inflation comic, and inflation is basically as the price of things go up. And as the price of things go up, you're not going to debate your needs, you're going to debate your wants. And infrastructure is something that many of us need. It's not a want, it's a need in many respects, because we need it to survive. So I hope
sounds fantastic. I must listen to this particular podcast.
I feel like it's more complex than that, but I just tried to drill it down because it is
exactly.
I guess, what advice would you give your younger self about this investment if you had to go back to the younger version of you?
Yeah, I think it's the question that you would often ask yourself, whether you would do anything differently, like now that I've spent 30 years of investing, whether I would have started and done something differently. And I guess I'm in a fortunate position that I would continue to give myself advice that I gave myself 30 years ago. And this advice was to invest in yourself first and foremost. So investing in your education, in your skills, in continuously acquiring knowledge, I think was absolutely critical, A, for my career, B, for my success as an investor, but also for this feeling of fulfillment as an individual. So I would, continue giving this advice to myself.
Advice. I guess, thank you so much for joining today. This has been extremely valuable for the audience members. I guess before we conclude, is there anything top of mind that you would like to share with the audience, or last words of wisdom?
Last words of wisdom. Interesting. Well, I would probably just go back to learning and adapting, just thinking about 30 years of experience probably creates a certain, hopefully some degree of wisdom. And the investment world, the beauty of it, that it looks nowhere near the same as when I started 30 years ago, and you continuously learn. And the important thing is also to adapt this learning in your investment style and what you do. So my last words of wisdom for this podcast, hopefully I will be acquiring more wisdom as the time goes on, is please do continue learning and adapting as you look for your ways to invest. Thank you, Nikki, for having me in this podcast. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, well, thank you, Luba. I have to thank you so much. If it wasn't for you, I probably would not be doing any podcasting. For those of you listening, Luba has given me great advice through the years and been somewhat of a mentor. So thank you, Luba. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope we continue our partnership.
Sounds good. Thank you, Luba. Bye-bye.
Bye.